Annually, Canada inserts around 600 million tiny saplings into the soil. Workers avoid cultivating in recreational areas or yards. They restore the deeply damaged landscapes. Terrain left completely exposed by heavy logging. Mountain slopes scorched dark by raging blazes. A whole woodland transformed into a copper shade. The responsible party? A bug, roughly the dimensions of a rice kernel. For many 10-year periods, teams have patrolled this ruined terrain. They embed sprouts hardly larger than a human palm. Afterwards, they surrender them to the elements and passing time. What these woodlands transformed into 30 years later is truly remarkable. It remains a narrative virtually nobody anticipated. To comprehend what sprouted anew, you must initially grasp what vanished. Canada contains one of the most expansive woodland tracts on the globe, a deep emerald ribbon of spruce, pine, fir, and birch. It stretches across the upper edge of the landmass. It blankets a region so immense you could easily fit the majority of Europe within its borders. For countless millennia, this environment naturally regenerated. Timbers flourished, perished, and collapsed. They nourished the tiny saplings that emerged next. Flames rushed past, and the terrain returned even more vibrant. It remained a flawlessly stable network since the previous glacial period. Then, everything shifted entirely. Within the duration of one human lifespan, that equilibrium shattered. The initial massive injury arrived via an unseen foe, the mountain pine beetle. It represents an indigenous pest, no lengthier than a single rice kernel. For the majority of recorded time, it existed peacefully in Western Canada. Frigid, snowy seasons controlled its population. Several weeks of intense chilling annually handled the task, thermometers plummeting to 40 degrees below zero. This eliminated the majority of the pests and suppressed their swarms. The timberland and the bug maintained a truce, a pact carved in solid ice. However, the snowy seasons gradually heated up. That treaty completely dissolved. The severe freezing temperatures arrived less frequently. The insect was abruptly unleashed. It started to reproduce rapidly. What ensued was totally disastrous. Researchers label it the biggest pest invasion in North America's documented past. The infestation commenced during the 1990s. It extended beyond 2015. The pest ravaged the pine woodlands of British Columbia. Every bug drilled directly into the outer layer of a trunk. It deposited its offspring within the vital fibers underneath. The young consumed those fibers. They severed the timber's capacity to transport moisture and nutrients. Subsequently, they migrated to the adjacent trunk, and the following one. Once the invasion finally subsided, the destruction was complete. It had wiped out pines across more than 18 million hectares. Envision a woodland matching the dimensions of Greece, remaining entirely lifeless. The timberland did not simply perish, it altered its hue. A conifer destroyed by bugs does not topple immediately. Initially, its foliage transitions into a dark, metallic crimson. Entire alpine slopes seem to be ablaze without one actual spark. Throughout the subsequent years, the crimson washes out into a spectral pale shade. The environment transformed into a colossal memorial ground. Naked, metallic stems resting side by side, stretching as far as anyone could observe. Aviators navigating above British Columbia reported a terrifying vision. Mile upon mile of crimson and pale ash. It represented one of the most massive arboreal collapses ever observed. But the devastation extended much further than the scenery. A breathing woodland extracts carbon from the atmosphere. It traps the element inside timber and dirt. It serves as one of the globe's primary respiratory organs. A fading landscape performs the precise reverse action. Billions of lifeless stems started to decay. They discharged their captured carbon upwards into the atmosphere. The woodlands of British Columbia ceased soaking up carbon. They transitioned into a gigantic wellspring of atmospheric pollution. The respiratory organ had started exhaling in reverse. Furthermore, the bug constituted merely a single injury. The weather continuously heated. Warm seasons became lengthier and increasingly arid. Forest blaze periods shifted into something savage. Blazes previously consumed tens of thousands of hectares. Currently, they devoured millions within one warm season. Woodlands that required 100 years to develop disappeared entirely. Transformed into charred branches and dust during a lone afternoon. On top of this lay the older scars, the gigantic logging zones, broad, naked sections where commercial harvesting had cleared the terrain completely. Operations shifted elsewhere, abandoning lifeless dirt in their wake, earth that no longer retained the memory of becoming a woodland. Position yourself centrally within these desolate regions. The initial detail you observe remains the absolute quiet. Zero breezes rustling the foliage, since no foliage exists. Zero avian melodies, since no sustenance remains available. Merely pale stems and the brittle noise of lifeless timber. It felt simple to assume the woodland was eternally lost, that absolutely nothing could resurrect its presence. However, citizens entirely rejected that conclusion. What they accomplished subsequently created history. It evolved into one of the most massive, most silent recovery campaigns across the globe. Canada chose to sow seeds again, not as a symbolic action, not as one isolated commemorative park. This constituted a commercial-scale endeavor, a project that has persisted annually for many 10-year spans. Nationwide, teams embed 600 million tiny sprouts every single year. 600 million. This action is not a singular occurrence. It represents the consistent pulse of a whole country. Reseeding currently acts as an enduring component of its territorial management. A large portion of this remains legally mandated. Whenever a woodland gets obliterated, the labor of reviving its growth commences instantly. British Columbia sustained the heaviest impact from the bug. During 2005, an exclusive initiative was launched. Its solitary objective? Revegetate the devastated terrain completely. Teams inspected millions of hectares of lifeless woodland. Professionals determined where the earth might recover naturally and where it required assistance. Wherever assistance was necessary, they sowed saplings. Tens of millions of sprouts entered the scorched earth. Year following year, a gradual, verdant response to a colossal tragedy. How exactly did those timbers enter the soil? It ranks among the most difficult professions nationwide. Canadian sapling insertion is performed completely via manual labor. Workers transport weighty sacks of sprouts along their waistlines. They hike over uneven, scorched terrain for 10 hours daily. A resilient worker can install exceeding 1,000 saplings into the dirt every day. Crouching low, slicing a narrow opening into the dirt, sliding a sprout inside, sealing the earth shut, advancing to the subsequent pace. Repeatedly, thousands of individual moments. They labor despite intense warmth, torrential downpours, and extreme fatigue. They pitch tents within isolated wilderness regions for multiple weeks. Every single one of those 600 million timbers symbolizes a human individual leaning downward. It constitutes one of the most phenomenal displays of bodily exertion in the contemporary era, and virtually nobody ever witnesses the effort. Yet burying a sapling is not identical to cultivating an entire ecosystem. The teams absorbed several difficult educational experiences. During the initial phases, the urge remained to sow swiftly and simply, line following line containing one solitary variety. Entirely uniform in age, squeezed tightly alongside each other, it resembled a woodland aesthetically. However, an ecosystem encompasses more than merely timbers. A barrier composed of uniform pines proves exceptionally vulnerable. It can get eradicated completely via one isolated illness, or one solitary blaze, exactly as the initial woodlands succumbed to one particular bug. Gradually, the scientific approach evolved. The updated guideline appeared misleadingly basic. The proper timber within the proper location. Sow a varied assortment of indigenous botanical varieties. Pair the sprout perfectly alongside the dirt composition and the gradient. Anticipate the weather patterns that are approaching, ignoring the atmospheric conditions that previously existed. Construct a woodland utilizing tremendous diversity, because diversity is exactly what permits an environment to withstand the impending catastrophe. During 2021, this silent campaign acquired a highly publicized fresh segment. Canada declared an ambitious nationwide commitment. They intended to sow 2 billion extra saplings across 10 consecutive years. It represented a colossal battle combating shifting global temperatures. It seized international news coverage immediately. By the midpoint of 2025, advancement became clearly observable. Surpassing 228 million of these saplings rested securely within the dirt. Numerous specimens were situated across terrain damaged heavily by forest blazes. Native populations spearheaded the initiative, rehabilitating their personal historical ancestral domains. Then arrived a transparent yet highly challenging pivot. Within its 2025 financial plan, the administration reduced the commitment significantly. The 2 billion objective was severely decreased. The initiative would currently yield approximately 1 billion saplings instead. It proved a genuine letdown for environmental scientists, a harsh indicator showing that governmental determination surges and collapses alongside financial plans and voting cycles. However, absolutely do not overlook the profound reality here. Canada's woodlands never relied upon one solitary governmental agenda. Much earlier than the international news coverage, the nation was presently sowing hundreds of millions of timbers yearly. That relentless, grueling labor persists currently. The ecosystems refuse to analyze administrative financial documents. They merely expand steadily. What exactly regarding the earlier cultivation efforts? The timbers placed into the dirt 30 years previously? They transformed into the most massive revelation overall. Even the professional researchers remained stunned. Something extraordinary occurs whenever you grant a cultivated ecosystem sufficient duration. Number 1. The initial revelation involved the explosive restoration of verdant foliage. Stroll onto an alpine slope cultivated 30 years previously, an incline that represented formerly nothing except darkened ash. You will not discover a sparse, synthetic timber plantation. You will encounter a densely packed woodland environment. Timbers stretching taller than a residential structure, a thick, leafy ceiling positioned directly overhead, profound shadows, damp moss, and discarded pine needles resting beneath your footwear. Teams sowed a meticulously considered blend of indigenous timbers while permitting nature to assume total control. The terrain achieved substantially more than merely surviving. It reconstructed itself entirely. It operates precisely identically to an untamed wilderness zone once again. The rehabilitation process was never sluggish. It was overwhelmingly abundant. Number 2. The subsequent revelation remained concealed within the atmosphere overhead. It required meticulous scientific observation to accurately quantify. Experts uncovered a highly remarkable fact regarding developmental pacing. A juvenile ecosystem avoids absorbing atmospheric carbon at a constant velocity. It accelerates its intake quite rapidly. As timbers transition into their robust, youthful phase, their appetite for carbon increases substantially. Regenerating woodlands achieve their absolute peak velocity regarding carbon absorption exactly at 30 years of chronological maturity. 30 years. This reality dictates that the ecosystems Canada cultivated a full generational span previously are reaching their optimum performance exactly right now. The tiny sprouts inserted into lifeless dirt during the 1990s reside currently within their absolute prime condition. They actively extract carbon straight from the heavens, substantially quicker than ever previously recorded. The respiratory organ that formerly exhaled incorrectly is finally drawing deep breaths inwardly once more. The magnitude of this future capacity appears absolutely staggering. Experts simulated tactical timber cultivation explicitly along the northern boreal zone. They merged orbital satellite intelligence, combustion behavior patterns, and atmospheric climate algorithms seamlessly. Their final deduction proved absolutely breathtaking. Cultivating 6.5 million hectares might alter everything completely. It could successfully extract nearly 4 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide across 75 consecutive years. That volume represents exceeding 5 times absolutely everything Canada discharges throughout one single annual cycle. Assuming it gets expanded further, that statistic might ascend considerably higher. Granted several decades, these timbers do not represent a minor symbolic gesture. They constitute the absolute most potent atmospheric climate weapon the nation currently commands. Number 3. The final revelation remains undeniably the most emotionally resonant overall. An ecosystem never revolves exclusively around atmospheric carbon mathematics. It revolves entirely around biological existence. As those cultivated woodlands aged gracefully, the untamed wildlife migrated backward. Experts charted the absolutely optimal rehabilitation locations carefully. They uncovered something profoundly encouraging there. The specific zones where timbers regenerate swiftest constitute absolutely essential biological habitats. They provide crucial refuge for highly endangered creatures, desperately clutching onto a continuously contracting globe. Rehabilitate the woodland environment, and you achieve more than merely warehousing atmospheric carbon. You physically reconstruct an actual dwelling. An ecosystem 30 years in age never resembles a uniform line of juvenile stems. It possesses intricate vertical dimensions. towering timbers alongside juvenile green sprouts, lifeless decaying wood alongside actively flourishing thickets, expansive sunlit clearings alongside heavily shaded enclosures. This specific architectural complexity provides precisely what untamed creatures demand constantly. Winged avians migrate backward to construct nests within the elevated leafy canopy overhead. Diminutive furry mammals relocate actively into the dense terrestrial underbrush below. Crawling bugs and spreading fungi actively reconstruct the imperceptible connective fibers of the living environment. The haunting absolute quietness defining the desolate regions actively brims with acoustic resonance once again. An environment cultivated strictly one individual sprout at a time ultimately transforms into a breathing biological society. The wild creatures simply migrated inward, because finally there existed a destination genuinely meriting their arrival. Visualize the scenario once additionally. Position yourself atop an alpine slope within Western Canada. 30 years previously, it resembled an expanse of spectral, pale, and copper-toned devastation. Appearing so quiet and stripped, you might assume nothing could possibly ever flourish there again. Position yourself atop that identical alpine slope currently. Directly above your head rests a leafy ceiling of vibrant green. Enveloping your body floats the aroma of sticky sap and moistened dirt. A winged avian is vocalizing quite closely nearby. The breeze travels smoothly through living pine needles, representing the initial instance across an entire generational span. The ecosystem did not remain permanently vanished. It was physically transported backward, strictly one individual sprout at a time, transported firmly upon the shoulders of laborers whose exact identities you will never discover. Mother Nature managed the remaining requirements beautifully. That remains the hushed reality residing at the absolute core of this narrative. Human focus constantly fluctuates. Initiatives commence and subsequently reduce their scope. International news headlines arrive and swiftly depart. However, a timber firmly embedded within fertile dirt avoids waiting patiently. It merely expands, year following year. Completely oblivious toward administrative politics, it expands continuously until it ultimately provides overhead shelter, cooling shade, and a permanent dwelling. Canada attempted deliberately to substitute exactly what previously vanished. While accomplishing this endeavor, they discovered something incredibly profound. A ruined woodland does not consistently represent an absolute termination. Supplied with adequate endurance, alongside sufficient human palms, it represents merely the most extended conceivable commencement.